Major takeaways the Bengals can take from the Super Bowl where the Eagles dominated the Chiefs, plus the latest on Tee Higgins, what he said about staying in Cincinnati, and much, much more right now on Enter the Jungle. Hi again, everyone, and welcome in to Enter the Jungle. He's Andrew Fox Miller. I'm James Rapien. Make sure that you catch us every single Tuesday at 8 Eastern right here on the YouTube channel Cincinnati Bengals Talk, wherever podcasts can be had, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and every week as well on the FanDuel Sports Network. And Andrew, let's get into what I think was probably a satisfying Super Bowl for Bengals fans, where the Bengals were certainly rooting against, whether it was Tee Higgins, Jamar Chase, rooting against the Chiefs. And I think most Bengals fans certainly were as well. And they got their wish because the Eagles just kicked the mess out of the Kansas City Chiefs. Did you enjoy Sunday night?
More than I expected. If I'd had the choice, I wouldn't have bothered with it. But then as I was watching, I was like, I'm kind of glad I'm watching this. I was not bored. Even though it was a blowout, I don't know what the general audiences think that had no interest in either side. I imagine it'd be a boring game, but it was so lopsided and I was so entertained.
Were you really?
Yeah.
I was bored. I was bored, bro. I was thinking, I literally was like, man, I wonder if I should watch episode 2 of The Boys.
We got to get you
on board right with where, yeah, you want me to watch that. And, I'm watching The Penguin right now. I actually have multiple shows that I'm trying to juggle. And it's like, man, I should be doing this. Obviously I didn't. It's the Super Bowl and you just never know. But like not even at halftime, I'm like, man, it's Sunday night. Like I could spend my time doing. So why were you so entertained? I'm confused.
Just watching Mahomes not know how to handle the pressure. Just watching, it just looked like a completely different team. It's not a fresh narrative to say that, hey, this Chiefs team, this offense, they're, are they really the team this year? Are they really playing that well this year? I get all that. Forget that. I just liked watching the complete collapse. Call me a hater, whatever you want. I don't know. It was something interesting to me, even if it was the Eagles, and I don't really have a big rooting interest in the Eagles.
Yeah, I totally get that. I do. I think the pressure part of it for Bengals fans was really something where it's like, all right, Pat, Joe deals with this. And to a lesser extent, but I certainly think that a lot of fans enjoyed that element of it where he just looked lost. I mean, he had happy feet. That's how Joe described it, as happy feet in the pocket. He had happy feet like crazy. I thought he was seeing ghosts. That second interception was wild. Anyways, let's get into, because this is not a show about the Chiefs, even though I think a lot of you probably took some satisfaction in the result in Super Bowl 59. But what's one takeaway, Andrew, that you'd have? And it could be about the Eagles, the Chiefs. It could be about both teams. That if you're the Bengals and you're this Bengals front office, coaching staff, that you want to hammer home to them as they go into a really important offseason.
It's a case study. It's something that you should be monitoring, trying to copy, trying to emulate. I mean, we can talk about the players that they've drafted, the players that they have under contract, what their playing average per year, all that. But this Eagles team, they won a Super Bowl in 2018 for the 2017 season. But they won a Super Bowl in 2018 with a different roster and different personnel. So you can't tell me it's solely coaching, solely their quarterback or any of that. That's a good front office. Like, what else can you say? The right people making the right decisions in that organization.
It's so funny because the main takeaway on Monday, like after the Super Bowl and Sunday night, was trenches. Howie Roseman prioritizes the trenches. And that's not wrong. Obviously, they were dominant in that area. You know who prioritizes the trenches as well? The Kansas City Chiefs. They certainly have prioritized the trenches, so much so that they traded Tyreek Hill to use that money on offensive line help. So much so that they paid Chris Jones a whole lot of money. And so to me, it isn't that simple. But the main takeaway I would have is you pay your good players. The Eagles, you pay your good players. The Chiefs obviously pay their good players. You don't have to overthink it. And there's going to be a lot of discussion. We're going to get into Tee Higgins and Trey Hendrickson coming up in a minute. The Eagles are paying Jalen Hurts $52 million average annual salary per year. A.J. Brown, $32 million. Devontae Smith, $25 million. Jordan Mailata, $22 million. Landon Dickerson, $21 million. They have multiple guys. They have 6 guys making $20 million or more. They have a tight end making $14 million. They have Saquon Barkley. So you're talking about tight ends making top market money, 2 receivers, multiple offensive linemen, your quarterback. Pay your guys. And then obviously you got to get it right in the draft. Duh. Whether or not the Bengals keep their guys, guess what they're going to have to do this offseason and next offseason and the offseason after that. In any year they want to win a Super Bowl and build their core, they're going to have to get it right in the draft. It goes without saying. Of course you got to get it right in the draft. No one's going out there to get it wrong in the draft. And so this idea that, the Eagles, they only prioritize, they didn't just prioritize the trenches. They kept their good players. They drafted Jalen Reagor, who I bet a lot of people watching don't even know who that is. They don't even know who Jalen Reagor is. Former TCU wide receiver. They took him ahead of Justin Jefferson. Did you know that? They took him ahead of Tee Higgins, ahead of Brandon Ayuk, ahead of all these guys. And guess what? They got it wrong and they made up for their mistake. And I think that's the other element here. You might get it wrong at times. Like the Chiefs, they got it wrong, I would say, with some of their weapons, some of their decisions. I think letting Orlando Brown Jr. was the wrong move. Letting him go was the wrong move. They should have just signed him. He would have loved it there. Obviously, he loves it in Cincinnati now. But these teams, they're going to, especially the Chiefs, they're going to retool some. And if you're the Bengals, you could do the same exact thing, retool, but you got to keep your own guys and then build around them. And that's what the Eagles did. And that's why they made it to the Super Bowl 2 years ago, lost, didn't get back there last year, retooled a bit, and boom, they're Super Bowl champs.
Yeah. I don't like this. I don't know. There's this sort of thought, fair or unfair, from my side, that Bengals almost go to the draft thinking, well, now this is how we retool. It's not bargain bin. It's not lottery ticket. These are players that you're acquiring and you're going to have to develop. It's going to take work and nothing's a guarantee. You should be operating in free agency as though the draft is a bonus at this point if you're the Bengals. So I hope that their approach is going to be retooling in free agency, plugging in whatever gap they need to plug in with quality. You're going to take some swings, to your point. They're not all going to hit the way you want, but if you're built appropriately, you can adjust. You could have a Cody Ford filling in for somebody when they're injured, and it's not the end of the world. You're going to be okay in the long run because you're being consistent and you're getting the right people and players. And by the way, all that is to say, I thought your big takeaway was just going to be when Patrick Mahomes dapped up his guys but skipped Samaje Perine. I thought that was going to be
Yeah, what is that, man?
I don't know. I watched that clip I don't know how many times. Everybody's like, oh no, he might have been busy in his thoughts. He might have been praying something and Patrick Mahomes didn't want to interrupt him. He stood up.
Yes.
They're like, oh, he skipped other guys. But they were looking down. They didn't even acknowledge the situation. Samaje stood up like he was being greeted, and nothing.
And I get it. He saw Travis, so he's naturally drawn to Travis. Maybe Travis Kelce played his last game. But then dap up Samaje. And he walked away. Like, Samaje is still like, don't do that to my guy. Samaje is like, he's so quiet, makes plays. And by the way, would have caught that pass that DeAndre Hopkins dropped at the end of the first half. DeAndre Hopkins. Good Lord, man. Watch he ends up in Cincinnati somehow, but I think that guy is washed. washed. One guy that better be in Cincinnati and is actually friends with DeAndre Hopkins. Well, it's number 5. We're going to talk about Tee Higgins and what he had to say about potentially staying in Cincinnati coming up next. Welcome back to Enter the Jungle. He's Andrew Fox-Miller. I'm James Rapien. And let's get into what Tee Higgins had to say. He's set to become a free agent next month, Andrew. If they don't franchise tag him, he becomes a free agent next month. And he sat down with Joe Danneman of Fox 19, and he said this: in March, that's when things start ramping up for me with free agency coming up. I would love to be here in Cincinnati. I love it here. I love my city. I love the fans. I love the coaching staff, everything that we're building, but it's out of my control. And he hesitated there before saying, but it's out of my control. Big smile on his face. What do you think? How do you read this? When you watch the clip, when you read the words, are you confident that T is confident that he'll be in Cincinnati?
Yeah, for anyone watching or listening, if you want to watch that clip, it's Fox 19 Joe on X, on Twitter. I couldn't help but think that T, and it's a T's nature, but I felt that as though T, the energy was much different than Trey, Radio Row mode Trey Hendrickson talking about his expectations in the offseason. Very, very much different than his quarterback, Joe Burrow, and sort of the energy he's bringing and the thoughts on what he expects out of the offseason. Again, that is sort of T's nature, but it something doesn't align. Something just felt a little off. I don't know. Maybe it's just me.
I think T wants to say, obviously, I want to be in Cincinnati. If these idiots don't pay me, I can't control it.
Oh.
Because he's done everything he can do to stay here.
Sure.
He changed his agent. Think about it. He fired the top NFL agent, basically. It's not the headline, but David Mulugheta, when you're going into free agency, that's the guy you want. If I was a free agent, I would want David Mulugheta because he's getting you paid.
Sure.
And I think T realized that was probably not going to happen if David Mulugheta was representing him. He would not stay in Cincinnati. So he switches agents. He has Jamar Chase's agent, Rocky Arsenault, in Alliance Sports. If a deal doesn't get done now, after Joe has said all the stuff that Joe has said, and T clearly wants to be in Cincinnati.
Yes.
That's why he said it's out of his control. He's done everything he can. He's not going to play for $20 million. Okay? He's not. He's worth way more than that. If that's the case, the viewer out there that's making 80 grand, go tell your boss you want to stay for 40 grand because you're happy with your job. No one's doing that. No one's taking that kind of haircut. And that is the same. It is the same for T. He wants to make that 25 to 30 million per year. Doesn't mean he wouldn't get more on the free agent market. But I think he's like, hey, I can't do anything else. And I'm trying to stay here. And I deep down think T wants to be in Cincinnati. I don't think that's just for the cameras. Will the front office get it done? That should be the first one, by the way. If we're ranking these, I would get T done now.
Yeah.
You know what Jamar is going to look like. Get T done. You talked about that last week, the urgency. Get number 5 done.
Yeah, the urgency, I don't know. Maybe it's a bit strong to say it this way, but sort of the courtesy. And what I mean by that is I don't want to hear, I swear, James, I don't want to hear a story about how T personally called the front office to at least have a conversation because he's not getting any calls back. I don't want to hear those weird, wild stories about you know what I mean? Like miscommunication, the stuff you've heard from players past. I don't.
I can hear it now. Tee Higgins tracked Zach Taylor down at Starbucks on their morning in and had a conversation.
Yeah. T's got family members picking up the phone and trying to get in touch with people. You know what I mean? This is the stuff. This is the whole, the optics, the whole offseason narrative. It's so gross, man. I cannot deal with this anymore. I know what you're saying. Cameras on and all that. Everything I've ever heard, every impression I've ever gotten is that T truly values being on this team in this city, loves this fan base, genuinely. And the more you hear it, the more you believe it, the more difficult it is to see him look a bit beaten there. Maybe it caught him in an off moment. We don't really know for sure, but it does feel the energy's not the same, like I said. Or maybe he's just glad Joe's out there speaking up for him. I don't know.
I just think he doesn't know. It's the unknown.
Yeah.
And you don't want to say the wrong thing. I know T is very aware of not wanting to say the wrong thing, period. And this is an interesting, he's not under contract like Trey Hendrickson. He's not under contract like Jamar Chase. He's potentially a free agent. And by the way, I said this last week, I'll say it again, and I think it will be the case. If he gets the free agency, and this is kind of a message to the Bengals front office, if he gets the free agency, there's no chance you keep him. It's zero. There is zero chance he will get booked this. I think I set the over-under at 30 million last week. I would say he gets more than A.J. Brown, who's at 32 million with the Eagles. I would not be shocked if he pushes that Justin Jefferson 35 million, if he takes the most money. And that's because there's going to be so many teams. There's no clear-cut wide receiver 2 in this free agent class. It's Tee Higgins, and then it's Chris Godwin coming off of an ACL, who's older and in not ascending like T, who's just turned 26 years old. So, T, if I'm the powers that be, I wouldn't let you get to free agency. I'm not sure what they'll do. We will certainly have you covered here on Cincinnati Bengals Talk. But from T to Trey, you mentioned Trey and what he said on Radio Row last week. There's also some insider info on what Trey could make it with his next contract. We will get to the Bengals star pass rusher coming up next. Welcome back to Enter the Jungle. I'm James Rapien. He's Andrew Fox Miller. We've talked about Super Bowl 59. We've talked about Tee Higgins. Now let's talk about Trey Hendrickson. Coming out of Super Bowl 59, one of the rumblings, according to ESPN's Jeremy Fowler, is that Trey Hendrickson could command up to $30 million per year. Obviously, he led the NFL in sacks this past season with 17.5. He has 35 sacks over the past 2 years and has been by far, I mean, he had half of the Bengals sacks this year, by far their best pass rusher since they signed him prior to the 2021 season. He also basically gave the Bengals an ultimatum when asked about it on Radio Row about his future. Pay me or trade me. And that's my summary, not his, but that's what he wants. We'll see if it gets done. $30 million per. If Trey Hendrickson's representatives say we want $30 million, and if it doesn't start with a 3, no deal, where would you be, Andrew? Because I do think that would put the Bengals in a tough spot.
It all comes down to, in either scenario, what's the plan? You sign him. We can't have the same situation we had in the defense last season, obviously. What are you going to do? And I don't know that we can rely on the draft. It hasn't seemed to work out quite the way we would like it to when it comes to the defensive line and the draft. So what are you going to do about the rest of it? For that matter, if you decide not to sign, or you shouldn't even say sign. I mean, look, the reality is he's still under contract for another year. So there's that. But regardless, if you decide to do $30 million a year, the same question applies. I'd love to know the scenario in either one, what they would do with or without a $30 million a year contract. I'd be uncomfortable with it as a fan and knowing what they could be doing with that type of money. I don't know that I'm fully against it. This
Week, certainly in the near future, but probably this week, I'll do something on T and on Trey on how I would handle both situations. And that's why you got to hit that subscribe button on the YouTube channel, Cincinnati Bengals Talk. And so because when it comes to Trey, it is unique because he is 30 years old. He's uber productive and he is under contract. He also deserves a raise. I also don't think that he's Myles Garrett. I also don't think that he's Micah Parsons. I don't think that he's the elite of the elite of the elite when it comes to that. It doesn't mean he's not awesome. Of course he is, but there's levels to this. Like Jamar Chase is on another level than Amon-Ra St. Brown. But there could be years where Amon-Ra St. Brown has more receptions than Jamar Chase. See what I mean? Like,
of course.
And so Trey isn't necessarily Micah. And people are going to say, oh, well, he's been way more productive. Okay, settle down there, champ. And so that's where I would be curious about is how much does he have to push this? Because if I'm the Bengals and you can get him for 25 to 27 million, makes a lot of sense. There is a max number. And at the same time, it's a poor free agent class where, yeah, you can get line help. But do you want to overpay when you can just pay market-ish value for Trey Hendrickson? Hopefully you can just get it done and keep him at the 25 to $28 million range, where I think that's where his market truly is. Now, if he was a free agent,
yes,
his market would boom, much like I said about Tee Higgins a few minutes ago. Why? Because there's going to be multiple teams pushing for him. Mm-hmm. It's different now because he's under contract, and so that changes it a bit. From everything the Bengals have going on to the chaos, and I mean chaos that could be coming to the AFC North. We'll get to that coming up next. Could Aaron Rodgers be coming to the division? Welcome back to Enter the Jungle. He's Andrew Fox Miller. I'm James Rapien. Aaron Rodgers is someone that if you look across the league, 2 AFC North teams are mentioned for his services with the Jets set to move on. The Steelers and the Browns. We don't need to get into the odds and the possibility of it happening. This is Cincinnati Bengals talk. This is not AFC North talk or Browns or Steelers. But as a Bengals fan, Andrew, which team, which landing spot for Aaron Rodgers, the future Hall of Famer, would concern you more?
Concern me. Pittsburgh would concern me. I'm here in this scenario. If I got to pick one of them, I'm signing up for the entertainment, James, and it's got to be Cleveland for the pure entertainment if that were to happen. I don't think Rodgers would do that. You know, he's kind of picking whether or not he's going to retire at the end of the day. And I don't know that you're going to play another year in this league with the Cleveland Browns right now. But with that said, if it happens, sign me up. Give me that Netflix original.
Oh, you could totally see. Oh, come on now. You could totally see the big play guys buying into Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, Jerry Jeudy. They convinced Myles Garrett to stay, even though Myles should get the hell out of Cleveland. Like, you could totally see that. Like,
it's their consolation for not keeping Flacco around.
and they'd be like, oh, and Watson, his rehab, he can be Aaron Rodgers back. All right. No, I'm just kidding. I don't think anyone in Cleveland is in on that train. But yeah, I think the structure of Pittsburgh and the possibility, like Aaron Rodgers himself isn't scary anymore. But let's say the Steelers do get a Tee Higgins. Well, that sucks. That would suck if Aaron Rodgers is throwing him the ball in Pittsburgh with that defense and that mindset and structure. So yeah, I think that would be the better landing spot for Aaron, the worst a worse outcome for the Cincinnati Bengals. The point is, this offseason could be wild. We're obviously going to have you covered, whether it's Tee Higgins, Trey Hendrickson, Jamar Chase, or anything Bengals on the YouTube channel, Cincinnati Bengals Talk. Catch us every single Tuesday at 8 Eastern right here. And for Andrew Fox Miller, I'm James